Tonight on Mark Latham's Outsiders, we're launching a campaign to save Australia Day. We're 6 months out from our great national day and we've got to save it. We're also going to have a look at the new Miss World Australia. I'm going to interview Alan Jones, Australia's greatest ever broadcaster, about anti-male employment discrimination and the mess with Malcolm Turnbull in the Liberal Party. We've got a great panel coming up with Miranda Devine and Corin Barraclough. We've got Zeg's Cartoons, The Outsiders Outhouse, and the Left Lunatic of the Week. Again, they've been added. A great competition for this left-wing insanity. It's a really good show coming up. Stay tuned. Trigger warning viewers, you've entered a very unsafe space. This is Mark Latham's Outsiders, Australia's most politically incorrect news and current affairs show. We're Australia's home of pushing back against political correctness, social engineering and cultural Marxism. What we try and give you here is the Australian habit, sadly lost in so many parts of the mainstream media, of straight talk. Straight talk is all important to get to the heart of the issues. We've got no agenda, there's no one out the back with a clipboard of words and phrases and topics that I'm not allowed to discuss. This is alternative media where we just try and give you the truth and rely on you, the public, to make up your own mind. We're not here to tell you how to think, act and behave, what to feel, all this touchy-feely left-wing crap. We're just here to give you the straight talk and the information and you make up your own mind. We've got a great show coming up. I'm here right in front of the Logan Metro Sports Centre on the outskirts of Brisbane, a wonderful outsiders city there, Logan. It's produced the great Cameron Smith in the rugby league, Jeff Crackerhorn, the new boxing champion. We love the people in Logan and it's very appropriate. We've got the Sports Centre in the background to our show this evening. Now, of course, we're in partnership with Rebel Media. Rebel Australia is up and going. To register and be part of all the Rebel Australia campaigns, go to the website, marklathamsoutsiders.com. It's there on the screen. Put your name down, your email address, marklathamsoutsiders.com. And it's on that question of campaigning that I want to start the show, because today is the 26th of July. What's the significance of that, the 26th of July? We are 6 months out from Australia Day, exactly 6 months to our great national day, Australia Day. We're launching a new campaign here at Rebel Australia, Mark Latham's Outsiders, to save Australia Day. There's the website. Go and sign our petition 6 months out to save Australia Day. It's saveaustraliaday.com. Very important to sign up there on the petition, saveaustraliaday.com. Why are we launching it 6 months out? Well, we know from past experience, recent years, the left-wing campaign to either abolish or move Australia Day is gaining momentum. In 2018, 6 months from now, the campaign to get rid of Australia Day will be at its peak. You've got not only the leftist outfits, the ABC, the Fairfax, Labor and the Greens, wanting to get rid of our great national day. You've also got coalition figures. We've heard this from Jeff Kennett and Ian Macfarlane, a former coalition minister, Jeff Kennett, a former Victorian Premier, saying they want to move Australia Day away from the 26th of January. Well, we've got to keep Australia Day. It's more important than ever. We hear the very valid talk that we're trying to save our Western civilisation. It's under attack at one extreme from Islamic terrorism, at the other extreme from cultural Marxism. Western civilisation needs to be defended. Why do we celebrate Australia Day on the 26th of January? It was the arrival of Western civilisation on the 26th of January 1788 in our wonderful vast continent of Australia. And all the benefits of the West have arrived since then. The economic development, the democracy, the culture, the architecture, the whole progress that we've had in Australia since 1788. It's worthy of celebration. It's no offence to the Indigenous people of this country. It's a day where we can come together and say this is a great nation, we value the achievements of Western civilisation, and as Australians we unite around it. In fact, that's what Australians are doing. Despite all the left-wing haranguing and putting Australia Day under siege, the day itself is being celebrated in greater numbers every year. Where I live in the southwest of Sydney, Camden, the people are 8-9 deep out in the median strip for the Australia Day parade. It wasn't like that 10 or 20 years ago. The numbers have really grown over the years, so the outsiders value Australia Day and want to support it. We do here at Mark Latham's Outsiders support that petition, saveaustraliaday.com. We know it's under threat. Imagine if Bill Shorten was elected at the next election. One of his first acts would be to cave into the Labor left and the Green and move Australia Day or even abolish it. Now, it can't be allowed to happen. We've got to campaign hard over the next 6 months to put the alternative argument to all the left-wing hysteria all the unreasonable talk about Australia Day. We're going to push back against it with your support, so please sign up. We're 6 months out. Now's the time to get active. Now, the other thing I want to say at the top of the show concerns some other activity that's been around in the media and social media, and that's the attack on the new Miss World Australia, Esma Volota. Let's have a look at her. Wow, what a beautiful, striking, attractive woman. No one can say that Esma Volota doesn't deserve to be crowned as the new Miss World Australia. So why the criticism? Why are there some people there on social media attacking her? Well, it turns out she's a Muslim. Now, no one can say she's got that position solely because of her religion. Such a beautiful woman deserves to be recognised in that pageant. She's won the crown, yet she's under attack for being a Muslim. Now, Kirralie Smith is leading the charge there on social media. She used to be with the Liberty Alliance, now with the Conservative Party, and she's made the point that the Muslims shouldn't get the award, and Volota's wrong to talk of Islam as a religion of peace. Well, I think we should acknowledge here that we need balance in the debate about Islam in Australia. Here at Mark Latham's Outsider, if there's a problem with Islam, we're the first to talk about it, seriously. We did that last week in the recommendations for stopping the rise of Sharia law in Australia. Now, you can go too far with these things. We don't want fundamentalism at the other extreme of politics where people assume every single thing that every Muslim does is wrong. There are some parts of the Islamic community we should be holding up and supporting as a role model for others. And in the case of Esma Volota, isn't it good to see a Muslim woman there not living her life according to the fundamentalist teachings of the Quran? She's got to cover up. Bare flesh can't be viewed by any male stranger. She's there dressing in a modern, attractive way. Throwing away the hijab, throwing away the burqa. She's no Yasmin Abdel-Magid or any radical leftist. She's actually providing a really good role model for other Islamic women in Australia. Throw away the burqa, throw away the hijab, dress in a modern Australian way. And I think she's a worthy Miss World Australia for that reason alone, in sending that powerful message to other Islamic women to be part of our culture, to integrate as much as possible. So while Kirralie Smith and her supporters, they're proud Australians, they fight hard for their beliefs, I respect that. I think they're wrong in this instance to pick on this woman, to say that she shouldn't get the award. I support her for the role model she provides. And it's also true to say that some parts of the Islamic community, they do regard their religion as peaceful. When I interviewed Pauline Hanson, I spoke to her about the Indian Fijian community in southwest Sydney that I know well. People kicked out of India, effectively kicked out of Fiji for working too hard. They've come to Australia as Muslims, they work hard, they integrate, they speak great English, they're good community contributors. I'll vouch for them. And they're the sort of people who should be held out as good role models for other parts of Islam in Australia. So we need to acknowledge here there is colour and shade in the Islamic community. Something's wrong like Sharia law, I'm going to talk out against it. If there's segregation like that dreadful Sharia law curtain at Auburn Pool in Western Sydney, I'll campaign against that. But in the case of Esma Volota, I want to say she's a role model we should be supporting. Throw away the garb out of the Quran, throw away the clothing there to shield her from the gaze of men, and dress in a modern, attractive way. Good on you, Esma. I hope your campaign and time as Miss World Australia is successful as you go through to the international competitions. We're supporting you at Mark Latham's Outsider as an effective role model. So I want to say those things at the top of the show. I think they're important points to make in the broad sweep of public debate. After this short break, we're going to come back with another man who's got a lot to say that's of great value, Alan Jones, Australia's greatest ever broadcaster. Stay tuned. Well, welcome back to Mark Latham's Outsiders here in front of the Logan Metro Sports Centre in Queensland. And I've got to say, I'm absolutely delighted to have another Queenslander in the studio. Australia's best known Queenslander, Australia's greatest ever broadcaster, Alan Jones. Welcome to Mark Latham's Outsiders. You're going to be involved with Jones and Co. I'm calling this Latham and Co.
Latham and Co. Well, I'm the Co. Is this really where Logan what?
Metro Sports
Metro
Centre.
Sports Centre.
Home of Cameron Smith,
I know.
The new boxing champion.
Jeff Horn.
Jeff Horn. It's a great place, Logan. Outsiders Centre. We don't have any of the fancy CBD
All
stuff.
this technology, it's amazing.
Genuine, the technology is amazing. Well, welcome, Alan, to Alternative Media. A whole new world.
Happy to be here.
A whole new world. Now, one of the things we're launching here is a campaign, SaveAustraliaDay.com. Today, we're 6 months out to the day from Australia Day. And in 2018, we're going to have the biggest ever leftist campaign to either abolish or move our National Day. We've got to support this, haven't we, as a celebration of Western civilisation and all the Western achievements in Australia since 1788.
Well, the answer to that, Mark, in many instances is there are local government elections. Get rid of the people who are arguing that the date must change. I think that, you know, it's a manifestation of the apathy, isn't it, that's there. I mean, I can't criticise you because you did have a go and you put your name forward, but we do criticise politicians and then we say, well, why don't we have a go? And in local government, we're always critical of local government, but we don't get up there. Well, this is a disgraceful attack on our history and our traditions and the things that matter to Australians. And so if that's the case, local government elections, find out whether they're for or against the 26th of January and get rid of them if they're against.
Well, the Fremantle Council has already moved the festivities away from the 26th of January.
And Clover Moore in Sydney.
Yep, it's going to be a pattern around the country. So you're right, vote them out, support Australia Day.
Definitely.
And on another subject of democracy, what's happening inside the New South Wales Liberal Party? Last weekend we had their big forum at the Rosehill Racecourse. Good to see the Liberals adopting a bit of real culture, going to a racecourse. But are those reforms going to go through? And if they don't, what are the ramifications?
We'll take the last question first. War, all-out war, and Corey Bernardi and Pauline Hanson will just be clapping their hands. So that's the first thing. If they don't go through, and there is a comprehensive and very significant move to torpedo them. Basically, Mark, what they sought to do about these reforms was poison the authenticity of them by the bedwetters locking in Abbott's name. They hate Abbott. They know they've done the wrong thing getting rid of Abbott. The polls are disastrous. It's significant that there are now 16 polls against Turnbull, and at the 16th poll against Abbott, Turnbull made his first run for the leadership. So forget the 30 polls, it was after 16. Now, Tony Abbott, you would know from being in politics, there can be good polls and bad polls. In other words, you've got a bad poll, but for a good reason. And what Tony Abbott sought to do was to retire debt. He took some very strong stands, which he didn't succeed in pushing through the parliament, but against expenditure. So the polls were against him because the left mobilised, the media mobilised, it was broken promises and all the rest of it. So he got some bad polls, but at least he was having a go. Now, what's Turnbull got bad polls for? Well, he tried to out-Labor Labor on Gonski and out-Labor Labor on Medicare, and he opposed the Wayne Swan mining tax and introduced the bank tax. Then he got hairs on his chest by having a sort of a massive portfolio of home security and giving Peter Dutton the Guernsey and putting 10 instruments of national security under one roof, and this is going to change the polls. Well, it hasn't. So you've got 16 on the trot. So you've got then the Liberal Party on a policy area and on an administrative area. On the policy area, they're not worth two bob, and they're going to Corey Bernardi and Pauline Hanson. Then on the administrative area, you've got this total lack of democracy. Now, what they wanted to do, the Hawke crowd, the treacherous and Machiavellian Hawke and Julian Lesser and Lucy Wicks, there's a whole stack of them, they were thrashed. We're talking about, you know, almost 800 votes to 400 on Saturday. Then they thought, oh, well, we'll torpedo that and we'll get the Hawke motion up. Now, it's significant to know in terms of democracy what the Hawke motion meant. It basically said, oh, we believe in a plebiscite for pre-selection, but existing members of Parliament are quarantined from that process. Then we want an activity test. So if you're going to actually be entitled to a vote, we better find out how much work you've done for the party before you know, all these poor pedestrian people. We don't want these mothers and volunteers and all these people having a say. And then if you become a joint member of the party because you believe in it, I know, wait, hang on. You'll wait for 3 years before you get a vote. Oh, 3 years? 3 years before you get a vote. So this was the democracy. Now, interestingly, Turnbull stood up and spoke on the Saturday. He didn't. There were only two members of state and federal parliament, New South Wales and federal parliament, who voted. Only two, Abbott and Angus Taylor. The others weren't there, weren't cited. They sent their lackeys in. I suppose some of their staffers went in and voted as a proxy. Turnbull said he supported democracy but didn't support the options which were available. So the argument that he was on Abbott's side is a nonsense. He was most probably hoping the Hawke proposals would get up. Now that they've been comprehensively thrashed and they know that basically the resolutions don't have a lot of standing within the party because they've got to go to the Constitutional Committee of the Liberal Party and then to State Council, and those entities are run by the left. But if the left now wants to get square and say, well, we'll forget the Abbott proposal, we'll endorse democracy via the Hawke proposal, well, the resignations and defections from the party will be mammoth.
Now, beyond that, if Tony Abbott was to come back as Prime Minister, how do you think he'd be different? Because he set a very good policy agenda, cuts to immigration, abolition of the Human Rights Commission, Senate reform, serious about debt and deficit. Do you think when he first came in 2013, he was under the illusion all Australians could love him as Prime Minister? Do you think second time round he'd be more fair dinkum in putting through a good policy agenda?
Yes, that's a very, very good question, isn't it? When Malcolm Fraser rejected supply and became what many saw as an illegitimate Prime Minister because I was opposed to the rejection of supply, I was there. I wrote the speech that opposed the rejection of supply, which was thrown in the bin, because I think that under the Westminster system, if you've got the numbers on the floor of the House, you're entitled to form a government.
And
it's
that
pretty
cruelled
simple.
Fraser.
Yeah, well, that's my point, coming back to your question on Tony Abbott. So then when he felt an illegitimacy, he spent a whole lot of his time, I'm using the modern vernacular, sucking up to the Labor Party. He'd be on the phone to Peter Cook from Western Australia, meaning, I'm not such a bad bloke. I mean, I most probably did the wrong thing and I'm here because I actually stole the mandate. And so in a sense, Malcolm Fraser wasn't Malcolm Fraser. And I think Tony, subconsciously, though he wouldn't admit it, swallowed the criticism that he was a bit of a pugilist and a bully and he got a boxing blue and he was going to come in and thump everybody and, well, I'm not really that sort of person. And so in a way, he governed, I think, inconsistent with his personality. Like in sport, I've always made sure that I coach people to believe if you play contrary to your personality, you're going to fail. Now, if you're a cricketer and you really like square cutting and hooking, and a coach comes along and says, don't play square of the wicket, it's too risky, and you start putting the bat down every time it comes out there, well, you won't make any runs. So I think Tony learnt from that now, as Menzies did. People forget Menzies got beaten in 1946. I mean, how could you lose an election after the war? He got beaten in 46. You look at people like Jeff Kennett. They ran Jeff Kennett out of the Victorian leadership and put Alan Brown in, and then Kennett came back. Or you look at Peter Beattie. Peter Beattie couldn't win pre-selection in Queensland for the seat of South Brisbane. They didn't want him. Then eventually, when by accident he got in and Goss won, Goss appointed a ministry of 19, there was no room for Beattie. So a lot of these people have been outsiders, to use your term, and have changed and learnt the errors of their ways. Now, Tony has learnt that the renewable energy target is rubbish because he was opposed to the notion of global warming. Totally opposed to it, but like Frydenberg, wasn't explicit in his articulation of it. Well, now he can see what's happening to electricity prices. Then, as you say, the expenditure thing, the biggest mistake he made on expenditure was Tony Shepherd gave them on the audit a golden opportunity to say, well, it's not us. This is an independent audit says you've got to retire $70 billion by 2020.
And they delayed the report. Up until almost budget eve.
Budget eve.
Big mistake.
Big mistake. And therefore, when they started cutting and whatever and saying, what's all this about? And he was hammered. So it is a different Abbott, whether the bedwetters will give him another chance. But Abbott, I can tell you this for a fact, Abbott won't be offering himself as a candidate for the leadership. I can tell you, I've heard from the horse's mouth. I've known Abbott for years. He will not be offering himself as a candidate for leadership now, tomorrow, or the next day. If they want to invite Abbott back because he's the only person that can beat Shorten, I mean, you have a poll here now which says that 58% or something of those people polled support Malcolm Turnbull as the leader and 23% for Abbott. Have a look at the figures. 80% of the Greens support Turnbull.
Yeah,
of course they do. And the Labor voters support Turnbull. Stay there because Abbott won 25 seats in 2 elections from Labor. He won 7 in the first election against Julia Gillard. He won 18 against Rudd. Never happened in the history of Australian politics. Now, do you want to win an election or don't you? He is capable of beating Shorten. They know that, and I think the young ones understand that because, quite frankly, Turnbull's putting their future and their careers at risk. It's all right for Turnbull. He's gone. He's 60-something years of age. There are young people who've come into the parliament with a lot of ambition, believing they can actually make a change and want to make a change, and now Turnbull is putting their political careers at risk. They're eventually going to wake up, but whether they've got the courage to make the decision is another thing.
But you're saying Abbott won't challenge Turnbull's leadership? He'll wait for events to unfold.
Events to unfold. And if they want to invite Abbott back, he's ready. He'll take the fight up to Bill Shorten, but he's not going to sort of go out there and say, well, I'm putting my hand up, I'm going to challenge. No, you work it out for yourself. You made the bed, you lie on it.
Okay, well, that's a good strategy. So we'll wait and see what does unfold. We'll wait.
I make the point about the polls, Mark. I mean, these are 16. The polls were never like this for Abbott. I mean, here we have a primary vote of 36. Well, that's the best it's been. But when Tony Abbott was the leader, the primary vote for the Liberals very rarely got below 40.
Oh, yeah, I can tell you from people out in the street in southwest Sydney. Abbott always had his supporters.
Yeah.
Back then, now, always.
Yeah.
Turnbull, you won't find anyone who's got anything positive to say about him. He's a dead duck.
Yeah.
He's a dead duck. But on another subject, I want to move on to a submission that's been made to us by one of the viewers in Western Australia who sent in a copy of this job vacancy advertisement for the Western Australian Police Force. If we can bring it up on the screen, you'll see this is a township called Carnamar, 300 kilometres north of Perth. They're seeking a new officer in charge at the North Midlands hub, Alan, and they're saying here that they're interested in having a female officer in charge at this location, partnering with their current female OIC at Three Springs. And you contact this guy, Superintendent Mike Bell. Now, why are they reserving policing positions, senior policing positions for women only? What happened to equal opportunity? What happened to a lack of discrimination? What happened about getting the best person for the job? Now, I rang Mike Bell earlier in the week and said, what the hell's going on here? And this is his response. This is what he said to me. This is being done for reasons of diversity and gender balance. The recruitment will be an equitable process, yeah, sure, but I'm trying to find a female for the job as we need more women in the force here. We have to push the minorities to apply. Well, women are a majority of the population. He's calling them a minority. But Alan, isn't there a basic principle here of good governance? Because if you're in a dangerous law and order situation, do you really worry about the gender, the race, or any other aspect of who's coming in the police force? Don't you want the best possible police person to be there to save you and get you out of trouble in the law and order situation? We're talking about lives here. We're talking about public safety. It's just ridiculous, isn't it, to be reserving policing positions for one part of the gender divide?
Well, your question provides the answer as well. I mean, your question contains the answer. It is ridiculous. Why does it happen? Because they get away with it. And this has gone on for so long until you arrived on the scene, thank God for you, because a few of us were lone voices in all of this. But this has gone on and on. You talk about the march through our institutions. This is all this left-wing crap, arguing that these are minorities. As you say, women are a majority of the population, minorities, and they're not represented. So if you take that to its necessary conclusion, God knows what the composition of the police force is. We've got to recognise when you're policing, and with anything else, but when you're policing, there are certain key factors that must apply to those people who embrace the notion of being a satisfactory policeman. One of them is the physicality of the job. And if you're working in those environments over there, you certainly have to get the best people. But forget policing. It's what you and I have said for ages. Why don't we employ people based on merit? Why? I'll tell you why. Because the leaders of this country don't advocate it. There is no national leadership on this issue. The Labor Party want to bias in favour of women, quotas, into the national parliament. So basically, you're not being equal with everybody else. How can they preach this kind of nonsense?
Well, it's ridiculous. The diversity agenda has become a sham. Earlier in the week, we found out there are now more female GPs in Australia, female GP doctors in Australia than men. Last week, we found out there's more female lawyers in Australia than men. You don't need to reserve spots for women in the police force. If capable women want to apply and get the job, good on them.
Correct.
But in a law and order danger, public safety situation, you've got to get the best person. There's no evidence out there of demonstrated discrimination against women in any part of the Australian workforce.
Those people who purport to represent us in the parliament are frightened to make these comments.
They are.
They don't have any guts. Whereas the challenge is to stand up in the public place and prosecute the case. Now, the public would be sympathetic to that case. Stand out, take the public into your confidence and argue, just like expenditure, just like everything else, which is difficult, argue the need for expenditure. You stand up and you say, I don't believe any Australian should have their hand in someone else's pocket. Now, I don't believe everyone should have to work. If you don't want to work, that's your business. But don't expect someone else to pay for the food on your table. It's a choice you make. You don't want to work, well, don't expect someone else's money to fund the lifestyle that you still seek to live. So you've got to argue these cases. We don't have people who are capable of persuading the electorate to a sensible viewpoint. I mean, Malcolm Turnbull says the Liberal Party are no conservative, the sensible centre. What do you say? The sensible centre?
Yeah, listen, that's it.
The sensible centre. Okay, well,
you get run over.
Glebe Point Road, stand in the middle of the road, you get run over. You've got to go to the left or the right.
That's it.
Hey?
But this stuff also builds resentment among the qualified men who miss out. Who miss out and think the system's against me.
Dead right.
So it's wrong. It's not the Australian way.
No.
And the politicians have got to pull their heads in. Alan, we've run out of time. Hopefully you've enjoyed your alternative media experience. You'll come back again.
Can I tell them the secrets of this?
No, you can't.
Oh.
Our secrets are secret. The only thing that
It
we...
is a secret, I'm telling you. This is astonishing technology,
it's alternative media
me.
technology.
Yeah.
The thing that we're always transparent about is straight talk, no PC, no social engineering, no cultural Marxism on this show. And of course, we trust the viewers to make up their own minds. So thanks for being part of that.
Thank you for what you're doing.
No, and you too. We'll continue our collaboration,
We will
including a cookbook at the end of the year. The viewers have got to know the cookbook's coming out. It's been a fair division of labour. I've submitted 79 recipes and Alan's done one. He's infamous.
Sultana scones.
He's fantastic. Sultana scones. We've got the cookbook later in the year. It's not just the politics. We've got everything for you.
And I've got to coach the Barbarians before then. Do you want to be the manager?
Well, I'll come along. Maybe I'll carry the bucket, the magic sponge.
There you are, the magic
Well, good luck with that, and good luck with reviving Australian rugby. That's a big job.
Thank you, my friend. Good to see you.
Okay, we'll be back in a few moments. Welcome back, and we've got the segment everyone looks forward to each week, our wonderful cartoonist in residence, Zeg. What's he got for us this week? The first cartoon is reflecting on the news that we've got a female Doctor Who. For people who watch that television show, a female Doctor Who, and Zeg saying he's got an alternative. Dr. What? Female, transgender, black, yellow, disabled, short-sighted. So Zeg's gone the full politically correct Monty there with his alternative Dr. What. Great stuff, Zeg. And the second cartoon we're going to look at, Peter Dutton and now Tony Abbott saying they want the postal plebiscite for same-sex marriage. And there's Malcolm Turnbull there, an ageing, bewildered Malcolm Turnbull, the mandate biting him on the bum, trying to collect all the votes. And Peter Dutton say, you're not the Prime Minister of Wentworth, Malcolm. And he's going to run that chainsaw through the process with a bit of democracy. So Zeg has done it again with his wonderful cartoons. We really, really thank him for his contribution, and he's on the ball again with his Outsiders Outhouse. He's got me there on the Thunderbox, the Outhouse, the last place in the nation now where we've got freedom of thought and speech and feelings. I'm there with the Outsiders Outhouse, and we've got the email address there. The email address to note, of course, is mark.latham@therebel.media to send in your views about the show and the issues of the day, mark.latham@therebel.media. And this week in the Outhouse, our first letter comes from our viewer Greg Smith, who writes as follows. Mate, love your work. Can we get those pair of green clowns to repay the $2 million in salaries? These are the two green senators who have been rubbed out because they didn't know the rules. They took it while stuffing up the country. That money can go to saving the barrier reef they've been harping on about ad nauseum. Surely the Greens would support that. The unfortunate Centrelink recipient who fails to declare something or fills out a form incorrectly has to repay it. Why not these incompetent fools? And that's very true, Greg Smith. But he's gone on to say he's nominating me for Australian of the Year. And he writes, fat effing chance, but you never know. Well, no chance at all with the committee, PC committee that runs that down in Canberra. Keep up the fight, Greg. I will keep up the fight 100%. Our next letter comes from Olga Rosenweg. Olga Rosenweg, who writes that her family came as refugees to Australia nearly 30 years ago from Moscow. Our first night out of the Soviet Union in Vienna in a refugee centre, we were afraid to go to sleep, afraid to wake up back in the Soviet Union. We were so thankful to Australia, which took us in and gave us Australian citizenship. We do not have another one. Well, good on you, Olga, and your family. We believe that if we came to another country to settle, we had to assimilate. Not to bring our church or our law, but to accept the ways of our new mother country. Well, Olga, that's a model for people coming to Australia where the Australian way is accepted. keep aspects of your own culture, but the primacy is with the Australian way. Good on you, Olga, and for sending that point of view in, which is a lesson for refugees and migrants arriving around this great nation of ours. And finally, in the outhouse, we've got Jeff from Victoria, who's got a fascinating story, unhappily indicative of what's happening in the education system. He writes as follows. In the education system in the 80s and 90s, I worked as a TAFE teacher at Box Hill Institute, working with young adults, mostly 17 to 25, with a charter to prepare them for work. I soon discovered amongst the staff, particularly in the humanities faculty, a blatant political bias towards the Green movement and militant feminism, all of which were propagandised to students. Dissent in the staff room was crushed with ridicule and abuse. Towards the end of my years at Box Hill, fed up with the propaganda, I went to the director, now deceased, and asked that something be done regarding accountability for such practices. And within a month, Jeff was out and transferred to another campus. I resigned disillusioned from teaching in the year 2000, seeing the profession hijacked by the left, and I've prospered in business. Leaving teaching was the best thing I ever did financially, but I missed the satisfaction of developing young people and their skills. Teaching has been completely hijacked by the left, and I pity the young people who have been subjected today to their brainwashing at all levels of education. Well, Jeff, unfortunately that's true now, not only of school education, university education and TAFE, but down into the preschool system, where you've got Marxist gender theory running, and you've got the absurdity of safe schools and respectful relationships programs. So, Jeff, we're trying to reclaim the education system for our nation and for common sense. Your lesson there, unfortunately, is indicative of what's happened not only then, but right through the Australian education system. So we've got a long way to go. Now, our final item in this segment, of course, is the left lunatic of the week. Always popular, always competitive. It could have gone to Gillian Triggs. Today marks the end of Gillian Triggs' tenure as the head of the Australian Human Rights Commission. Thank goodness for that. Good riddance to her. We don't need her misleading of Senate committees, persecution of people like Bill Leake, the university students in Brisbane. It's the end of Gillian Triggs. She was a wonderful nominee for Left Lunatic of the Week, but it's always very competitive. The left out there trying to outdo each other with their lunacy and insanity. I'm giving it to Julia Baird, who's put out this propaganda at the ABC trying to demonise Christian men. There's Julia Baird, the ABC. She's got the cross through the feminist symbol. She's put out the propaganda trying to demonise Christian evangelical men as the worst cause of domestic violence in Australia. We know that's rubbish. We know there are many more problems out there. She hasn't produced the statistics in Australia. She's relied and cherry-picked on research, dated research in the United States. This is not journalism, it's propaganda. And after this short break, we're going to be talking to Miranda Devine and Corin Barraclough about that very subject, the left lunacy of Julia Baird, and other related matters. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Mark Latham's Outsiders, where I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Corin Barraclough, wonderful columnist at the Daily Telegraph and contributing so much to Mark Latham's Outsiders, particularly on the issue of child support, which we're going to discuss. Thanks, Corin.
Hello, good to be here.
Also Miranda, one of our original
Hi,
panellists.
Mark.
You were
Yes.
here at the very beginning
I
in this
was indeed.
alternative media experiment.
And look at you now, bigger and better than ever.
We're going all right. We're
Yeah.
going all right and enjoying the experience and hopefully giving the viewers a good factual material, which we're going to discuss right now. Now, on that, it's very important to note, in the mainstream media at the ABC, we've had this propaganda from Julia Baird and effectively a whitewash from Media Watch on Monday night, where she's been allowed to get away with the assertion that the main domestic violence problem in Australia is Christian evangelical men. Well, it raises the issue, what about the Islamic community? What about those terrible figures in Indigenous communities for domestic violence? What's going on here, Miranda?
Well, and what about atheist men? Do they not perpetrate domestic violence? Look, you know, I like Julia Baird. I worked with her for a long time. She's a good journalist. I do not understand what's happening here, and she doesn't need me to defend her because she's got Paul Barry from Media Watch just gave her a complete rails run.
He blamed the headline writers. Anonymous headline writers at the ABC are the problem.
But the problem for Julia Baird and her co-author, they spent a year doing this. You'd think that in a year they might have actually contacted the people who wrote who authored the research on which they based their spurious thesis.
In the United States.
Yes, and they didn't do that. And you know, both authors of both pieces of research have now come out and said that they've been misconstrued. And you know, that's very embarrassing. And the sort of contentious the contention at the heart of her Julia Baird's entire program was that somehow evangelical men or Christian men are more prone to beating their wives. Now, that just doesn't work on the figures. It doesn't work any which way. We know that Aboriginal communities have got 32 times more likelihood prevalence of domestic violence. Why you would bring up this red herring, I don't know.
Well, Corin, as a professional journalist, someone with extensive experience, isn't there a problem in Baird's technique? Because she's done it 2 times now. Firstly, on the assertion that all Australian women lack confidence, and now this assertion about Christian men and domestic violence. Yeah, well, you're exhibit A and B here for women lacking confidence. But Baird's technique is to start her presentation with a preconceived idea, what she wants to report, find a fig leaf of information overseas to cover up the propaganda, and then extrapolate that information right throughout Australia. Now, it's not journalism, is it? It's just propaganda.
Look, if there's new research that comes in that genuinely backs up something that you really believe in, absolutely, go for that. But you can't have your headline waiting and then write a story around it. It's just not right. And I think people have seen through it. It's such a heavy agenda. There's literally, as you say, cherry picking to suit a narrative. And this is the problem. Where do you go with such a fierce, feminist, gendered narrative, which is already on shaky stilts? Throw some religion in, and you're really on dodgy ground there, with absolutely nothing to back it up.
It's disrespectful, isn't it, to the communities that have got these horrific levels of domestic violence? To
trivialises it.
Well, and it doesn't encourage the idea that government would target the communities where the problem is most severe. I mean, I looked at the figures there in the New South Wales Crime Bureau for the suburbs surrounding the Hillsong Church in northwest Sydney, and their domestic violence stats are way below the New South Wales and national average. Yet for Baird, that's supposed to be the hotbed, and that distracts from the real problem, doesn't it?
And, you know, I think that the reason for this really underlying it is that the ABC cannot bear to say anything negative about Islam. And so, of course, they ignored the story about Kaiser Trad saying that it's okay to beat your wife, and then Hizbut Tahrir had that video with the 2 women talking about, you know, being lightly beaten is fine, that's in the Quran. And the ABC just went dead on it, and in fact was called out by its own Media Watch. So they did, as a precursor to this Christian, anti-Christian story, they did a very mild piece examining domestic violence in Islamic communities. And so this is obviously their attempt at moral equivalence. But to have moral equivalence, you have to twist the facts. And as you say, you just need to go to the New South Wales Bureau of Crime Statistics to see exactly laid out for you in black and white where the problems are.
And they did none of that.
None of that. And it would be so much more helpful to do that if you actually cared about domestic violence.
And I think that's at the very heart of this issue, is the funding then doesn't get to the areas where it's desperately needed. It's all absorbed in tying pretty white ribbons, and it's not actually reaching the communities that are so desperate for it.
Now, on the topic of left feminist propaganda, a couple of weeks ago here we uncovered the leaflets that the Labor Party is using in inner Sydney local government elections. We've got them on screen here. There's the one there about proud to be a nasty woman, nasty women of the inner West unite. What about this one? Give me the confidence of a mediocre white man. That's a vote winner, isn't it? Give me the confidence of a mediocre white man. My wife and my daughter would get that and rip it to shreds. So what sort of insult is that? This is how modern Labor apparently is campaigning. This was launched in the presence of Carmel Tebbit, former Labor Deputy Premier, partner of Anthony Albanese, Jenny McAllister, the Senator, the local state member Joe Halen. How do you react to this, Miranda?
Well, and then Tanya Plibersek, of course, is featured prominently on the banner.
Yeah, she'll be part of it.
And look, this is just a copy of Hillary Clinton's attempts. A nasty woman was the insult that Donald Trump gave to her when she was being genuinely nasty during one of those presidential debates and accusing him of, diddling his taxes and so on. And so they've sort of taken this up, the American feminists, as a proud banner for themselves, nasty women. But it didn't work for Hillary Clinton. So why on earth would Labor women here want to take on these American sort of brands that is quite insulting to women? Like, I don't think anyone wants to be nasty. And why be a nasty woman? Why say you want to bring up nasty women as children, you know, as your daughters?
Yeah.
Who wants to be nasty?
Yeah, nasty women. May we know them, may we be them, may we raise them. I mean, it's, as you say, Hillary Clinton failed with this. It's definition of fanaticism, where all is lost, redouble your efforts. Well, and that's what inner city Labor left is doing.
And as the mother of sons, and you know, we all have sons, I do not want them being, you know, having to date nasty women. I don't want nasty women to be raised up to be my sons' wives. So we want nice women. Like us.
Well, nice, capable, confident, strong women. And that, in my experience, is the typical Australian woman these days. So the left are way out of touch. But Corinne, can I ask this slogan here? Julia Baird used it as well. Give me the confidence of a mediocre white man. Why does the left actually talk down about the capabilities of women today? Because that's just a dreadful insult to the women. For instance, we've got the news that we've got more female GPs in Australia now than men. Are they mediocre? We've got more female lawyers than men in Australia. We've got 60% of women in the public sector out of Canberra are female. None of that is mediocrity. What's going on?
Literally at some point when none of us were looking, being a white man has become a crime in Australia. And it is outrageous. There's a pocket of raging, elitist, feminist echo chamber dwelling folk who have literally lost sight of anything that can be pro-women without being anti-men. And there's a very subtle but very huge difference in being those two things. And coming out on attacking men isn't only alienating men themselves, other mediocre white men looking in the mirror in that very electorate, but also the women who love them. And I think that's the point that feminists have now, modern feminists have really, really missed, is actually women love their men. They have sons, they have fathers, they have family. They don't want to be, they don't aspire to be nasty, as you say. It's not inspirational. I've never wanted to be a nasty anything, and I've never wanted to be mediocre either.
Yeah, I can't understand. I grew up in a Labor Party where the idea was to give everyone the confidence and opportunities and education to achieve in life whatever they wanted. And I always give the message to my daughter, you can be anything. And I think she'll end up first female Secretary General of the UN. That's where I think she's headed. And that's what she probably thinks, you know, at her tender years. So why talk down to people this way? It's counter to what the Labor Party has always stood for in lifting people up. Not settling for mediocrity.
And it's insulting the very people that they are trying to reach out to. You know, it's carrying on with this. Hillary Clinton, the most disastrous line from her campaign was calling people deplorable, you know, racist, sexist, xenophobic. It's identity politics. It's divvying people up according to their, you know, their sex, their colour. It's just a horrible way of behaving. It didn't work for Hillary Clinton. It backfired. As you said, I mean, I think, what were they, middle-class women, working-class women did not vote for Hillary Clinton. Hillary thought that women would just turn out for her because she was a woman.
And lots of resentment from white men who marched out and voted for Trump, and they're still complaining about it. But Corinne, one of the great pieces of work you've been doing on our Facebook page and website is in relation to Child Support Agency, one of the real problematic areas of government administration. There's a new campaign, the social media bombardment campaign. What are we doing now to try and shift this problem?
Yeah, it's a Facebook page called Child Support Australia Time for Reform and Change. And they have a really full-on media strategy they're calling it media bombing campaign. So they're going after the likes of our friends Alan Tudge and Christian Porter. And you know, it's one of those times when, much as there are days where I think we all wish social media and technology had never been invented, this is one of those times when you're really kind of like cheering in the background. They're rallying people. What they're trying to do is actually get movement on that was agreed in the Senate. They're actually trying to get change. What they want from CSA, which is just turned into a black hole of a department, is some accountability, some transparency, and this group has come together where they're targeting specific questions, which are not unfair questions.
Right.
So, you know, the other thing about, I guess, pulling these people together into a group is, this is the danger of a narrative. You have the narrative over on one side, you have a very protected government department who can keep you on hold, call you out of hours, call you at weekends, all of these dirty tricks that we know that they're very, very, very good at, in a very similar way to Centrelink. And they're almost untouchable, but they're messing with people's lives. Just yesterday, a post went up with a girl who'd lost an old friend of hers who'd been battling child support. And they're real people, real lives. It's not identity politics. It's not your echo chamber. It's not people that think nasty women is amusing. This is so the opposite end of the spectrum to that. It's really raw. It's really, and it's devastating. And they are real people struggling to make their voices heard.
But it's a similar mentality, isn't it? I mean, it's the whole mentality of the CSA seems to be that every father is a deadbeat dad,
So, yeah.
and that
And he's done something wrong.
yeah,
That's the
absolutely.
assumption.
And how does it help the children if that's supposedly the aim? If their fathers are bankrupt, feeling besieged,
Yeah.
pushed to the brink of suicide, and feeling resentful all the time because they're treated by this agency as if they're somehow criminals.
Yeah.
And, you know, I know someone who's been involved in it, and it doesn't matter, you know, if he overpays, unlike with the ATO, if he overpays the child support agency because they've, you know, worked out his pay incorrectly, he doesn't get a refund.
No.
He just has to wear it.
Yep, that's it. And people are being hounded and hounded who genuinely can't pay. There was someone who posted this morning saying, is it right that I'm still paying for my wife who's passed away? You know, the department is a mess. And the good thing about social media and that kind of building that kind of ground upwards, that groundswell, is there are voices to be heard, and they're loud when they shout all together. And there's such a huge amount of support coming from there. And, you know, I guess think you've got two approaches at coming at gender politics. You can drown in your elitism, or you can come back to the fact that 6 men a day are taking their own lives because they don't see a way forward. And we know there's a connection with family support. We know there's a connection with the CSA. The government, of course, would desperately not want that to be shined, you know, to be forced onto a spotlight. But it's there, and people like to look at these issues separately. What they don't like is people who come along and start joining up the dots. 6 men a day take their lives. There's a growing pressure on the CSA to start coming up with some answers and address that balance. And I think even putting this story, everything that's going on with CSA reform and the huge need for reform, alongside a politician speaking about nasty women shows where we're at.
Yeah. And what can our viewers do to join the campaign to improve the child support system? What can they do?
I'll write up a piece after the show, so I'll make
Okay.
sure that goes up
That'll
on
be on
the
our
site.
Facebook page, Mark
Yep.
Latham's Outsiders, and also the website.
I'll put
Thanks,
some details
Corinne.
on there.
Now, finally, we're going to have a look at the TV rating sensation that swept the nation. It's hosted by one of our friends here from Mark Latham's Outsiders, Ben Fordham, also Beck Madden with Australian Ninja Warrior. Let's have a look at the action and then talk about it. Well, Miranda, it's a great show that's captured the imagination of the nation, but it's raised inevitably in this political environment issues of gender inequality and gender equity. So you've had a little debate with Carl Stefanovic at Channel 9. What's all that about?
Well, Carl is being, trying to be a sort of a male feminist, because he was watching it on Sunday night with his daughter, I think, and he thought that it was rather unfair that Andrea Ha, who was the first woman who's been able to actually make it up the warped wall, which is a really difficult, if anyone hasn't seen it, it's this...
It took 6 years in the United States for a woman to get up the wall. Andrea's done it first season in Australia. Fantastic.
Yeah, she's amazing. And you know, I think Carl thinks, and a lot of people think, that you should give women some sort of easier obstacle course because, you know, it is more difficult. They're not as strong as the men. But when you see Andrea, and I actually had the opportunity to meet her the other day, and the 3 young male finalists, she weighs a lot less than they do. She's 57 kilos, they'd be 90. And so being light actually does help. It's actually, it benefits her in quite a lot of the obstacles. So I think in fitness wise, they're probably, the males and the females, equal. And when it comes to doing the obstacles, it's a mind game. And because she's the first woman, I think at the very last minute, it was not her physical strength, was her mental strength, because at the very last minute her toe dipped in the water. So she's going to do it again, and I have no doubt that she will be victorious.
Great. So the equity argument is that Andrea Ha should get sort of a gentle slope to climb as opposed to the men who've got to go up the steep
No,
wall.
no, no.
Is that what Carl Stefanovic
that's what
is
Carl
saying?
wants.
That's what Carl's wanting. But doesn't it detract, Corin, from the female achievement
Absolutely.
to be given a head start,
How
an easier
fantastic.
task?
We hear so much about men's sport versus women's sport. We hear so much about the inequality there. How fantastic that this is a level playing field. It's a new obsession. It's rating its socks off, and you want that level playing field, yeah.
So we're supporting capable women here at Mark Latham's Outsiders. Esma Valoda earlier on, the new Miss World Australia, and Andrea Ha, who's been performing so wonderfully in the Ninja Warrior contest. That's all we've got time for this evening. I want to thank you, Corin and Miranda, for a great panel and discussion. Great to see you again, and congratulations on all the important work you're doing for fairness and political incorrectness in Australia. Speaking your mind, we love that all the time. Thanks to the viewers for watching. Don't forget our website's all important, marklathamsoutsiders.com, and that new campaign, please sign up, sign the petition, join our push to saveaustraliaday.com. There it is, saveaustraliaday.com. We're 6 months out from Australia Day. We're not going to let the left move our great national day or abolish it. We're going to fight back over the next 6 months, and this is the starting point, saveaustraliaday.com. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next Wednesday.